Before the Fellowship was formed, before Frodo left the Shire, Middle-earth was already at war, a silent, secret war. A creature twisted by the ring held the key to Sauron's greatest threat, and two of the most legendary figures in all of Tolkien's legendarium, Aragorn and Gandalf, hunted him through shadow, swamp, and snow. This is the story of the hunt you never saw, a deadly game of cat and mouse that shaped the entire fate of the War of the Ring. Welcome to You Shall Not Scroll, where we dive deep into the lore of Tolkien's legendarium, exploring the stories between the pages and behind the scenes. If you're into ancient prophecies, broken swords, and the tragic lives of twisted hobbits, you're in the right place. And please consider hitting that subscribe button. It would mean the world to us. So today, we're unraveling one of the most crucial and most overlooked chapters in Middle-earth's history, the hunt for Gollum. A desperate search that began decades before Frodo took the ring to Mount Doom, and which may have saved all of Middle-earth. The story of the hunt for Gollum begins with Gollum's life before the ring. He was born Smeagol around the year 2430 of the Third Age, and lived by the banks of the Anduin on the edge of Wilderland. Smeagol was the most inquisitive and curious-minded of his family. He was deeply interested in roots and beginnings. He dove into pools, he burrowed under trees and growing plants, he tunneled in the green mounds, and he ceased to look up at the hilltops, or the leaves on trees, or the flowers opening in the air. His head and his eyes were always turned downward. When Smeagol was in his 30s, he went fishing with his friend and kin Deagle. Deagle found the One Ring, and it immediately worked its corruption on Smeagol, who killed Deagle and took possession of the ring. This act of violence and his succumbing to the ring upon first receiving it is what set Smeagol down the road he was destined to follow. On the opposite side of the spectrum, Bilbo had pity for Gollum and chose not to kill him when he first gained possession of the ring. Thus, Bilbo was far more immune to its evil and corruption. Smeagol was blamed for the death of Deagle and was treated as an outcast. He often went about with the ring on, spying on conversations his family and friends were having. Eventually shunned from the community, he made his way to the Misty Mountains. Tormented by the sun, Smeagol wormed his way into the heart of the mountains, and after 478 years, the ring abandoned him. In one of the most direct influences from the god of Tolkien's world, Eru Ilúvatar, Bilbo then found the ring while groping around in the pitch black of Gollum's tunnel. Bilbo won the game of riddles they ended up playing and escaped with both his life and the ring. After Bilbo escapes with the ring, Gollum doesn't stay in the dark for long. Around Third Age 2944, he begins a desperate search. His path takes him out of the mountains and into Mirkwood and to the streets of Dale. There, he learned that the famous hobbit, Bilbo Baggins, was from the Shire. With this new information, he headed back through Mirkwood, where he was nearly captured by the Wood Elves. He avoids them narrowly, slipping away out of the forest. There was rumor of him throughout the woods, with woodsmen saying there was a new terror abroad, a ghost that drank blood. It climbed trees to find nests, it crept into holes to find young, it slipped through windows to find cradles. Then suddenly, instead of crossing the Misty Mountains and searching for the Shire, Gollum was drawn to Mordor by the call of Sauron, who was calling all evil things to him. Gollum had been consumed by the ring, and even without its presence, his will was tugged all the way to Mordor, where he would meet a friend in spider shape. Gandalf, already wary of the ring in Bilbo's hands, began connecting the dots. In the year 3001 of the Third Age, Bilbo left the Shire, and Gandalf turned his attention in earnest to uncovering the ring's origins. Seeking news of Gollum, he called upon Aragorn, heir of Isildur and a master tracker, whom he had met and befriended in 2956. Aragorn believed it was his duty to set matters concerning the ring right, since Isildur had claimed the ring as Wergild. By this time, he was battle-tested and counted among the greatest woodsmen in Middle-earth. Unbeknownst to Gandalf and Aragorn, Gollum had been in Mordor with Shelob since 2980, nearly 30 years of twisted partnership, so no trace of him could be found. Eventually, in 3009, Gollum was captured by Sauron when he dared to venture farther into Mordor. This was the very same time Gandalf and Aragorn began their true hunt for him. They had abandoned the search nearly 60 years earlier when Gollum slipped away from Mirkwood, and Gandalf deeply regretted that decision. Had he captured Gollum before Sauron did, many evil deeds might have been prevented. Now they searched in vain, unaware that Gollum was already imprisoned in Mordor. For the next 8 years, they pursued him on and off, never realizing how close and yet how impossibly far they truly were. Their search carried them through the Vales of Anduin, Mirkwood, Rhovanion, and even the confines of Mordor. Consider this: 8 years spent tracking a single creature across forest, marshes, mountains, and shadowed borders, traversing Middle-earth for nearly a decade, and encountering its many cultures and peoples would surely make for a compelling film. There would be opportunities to see Beorn and his people in the Vales of Anduin. Legolas and Thranduil, along with the Spiders of Mirkwood, would undoubtedly be featured, and witnessing the Rohirrim prior to Theoden would be especially significant. Fortunately, at the time of this recording, a film is in the works, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. Gollum was personally tortured by Sauron, which is utterly terrifying, and revealed all he knew about the ring, confirming Sauron's suspicion that it was indeed the one. Through Gollum, Sauron also learned of hobbits and the Shire. After 8 years, Gollum was released, though spies were set to follow him in the hopes that he would lead them to the ring. It was at this time, as Aragorn journeyed homeward, that he finally captured Gollum on the outskirts of the Dead Marshes, where Gollum had managed to lose the spies who had been trailing him. Aragorn recalls this moment at the Council of Elrond, when Gandalf reveals that he had heard news of Aragorn's capture of Gollum, and admits he could not guess what deadly peril Aragorn had endured alone. Aragorn's response is characteristically restrained. There is little need to tell of them. If a man must needs walk inside of the Black Gate, or tread the deadly flowers of Morgul Vale, then perils he will have. With those few restrained words, Aragorn hints at horrors he will not name. Like his forefather Beren of the First Age, he walks roads no mortal man was meant to tread. He had stood within sight of the Black Gate of Mordor. He had crossed the poison-haunted paths of the Morgul Vale. And yet, he offers no tale of glory, no recounting of terror. He simply falls silent. He explains that he had nearly despaired. After long years of searching, his hunt seemed fruitless. But on the return from the very confines of Mordor, he saw at last the signs he had sought for so long. Soft footprints beside a muddy pool, Gollum's tracks. The trail was fresh. It led away from Mordor and into the Dead Marshes. There, by a stagnant mere, coated in green slime, Aragorn finally found him, lurking, watchful, wretched. Aragorn does not soften the memory. He admits he was not gentle in taking Gollum. The creature bit him, and Aragorn remarked grimly that Gollum would never love him. Gollum would not speak, he would not cooperate, and Aragorn later said that bringing him alive all the way to Mirkwood was the worst part of the journey. That statement is revealing. This is the man who walked alone near Mordor, a man who looked upon the Black Gate and survived, a man who passed through the Morgul Vale, a place of dread even in legend, and yet refused to speak of what he encountered there. And still, he says that escorting Gollum was the most difficult trial of all. It tells us something about that journey, but it tells us even more about Aragorn. He went alone into the darkest regions we see during the War of the Ring. He faced horrors we can only imagine, and he returned. Mission accomplished, burden carried in silence. Aragorn led Gollum through the north end of the Immen Mule and crossed the Anduin just above Sarn Jaber. To make the crossing, he bound Gollum to a piece of driftwood and swam them both across the river. From there, he journeyed north, keeping as far west as he could, passing along the skirts of Fangorn and crossing the rivers Limelight, Nimmerdale, and Silverlode. He traveled through the Ease of Lorien, carefully avoiding Moria and Drimril Dale, then went over the Gladden Fields until he came near the Carrock. With the aid of the Beorings, he crossed to Anduin once more. The entire journey on foot spanned 900 miles, or about 1,500 kilometers, and it took Aragorn 50 weary days before he was finally able to deliver Gollum to Thranduil in northern Mirkwood. There, Gollum was questioned by Gandalf and confirmed Gandalf's suspicion about the ring. The spies who had followed Gollum were unable to seize him from Aragorn once they picked up his trail again, so they returned to Sauron. In response, Sauron devised a two-part attack, one part of which was an assault on Thranduil and Mirkwood, intended to capture or kill Gollum. During the Council of Elrond, Legolas recounts how his people in Mirkwood had shown Gollum a measure of strange mercy. Though watched, he was not kept in chains. He was permitted to walk beneath the trees at night, even to climb them, as was his habit. The elves hoped that with patience he might yield more of his knowledge, but Sauron had not forgotten him. About a year later, while Gollum sat high in a tree, the long-prepared assault upon Mirkwood was unleashed. In the confusion of orc attack and elven defense, Gollum slipped away. He evaded both his captors and Sauron's servants alike, vanishing into the wild. All trace of him was lost. With both the elves and the Dark Lord's forces hunting him, Gollum crept south and eventually took refuge in Moria. There, in the blackness beneath the mountains, he survived by stealth alone, stealing from orcs, hiding in shadows, living like a whisper in the dark. In time, he discovered the west gate of Moria. His thought turned once more to the Shire, to the ring that had been taken from him, but he could not open the doors. He lacked the strength to force them open from inside. Then chance, or perhaps something more than chance, intervened. In January of the following year, the company led by Gandalf entered through that very west gate. After nearly 80 years, Gollum was once again within sight of the ring, and he began to follow Frodo Baggins. Everything that unfolds in the Fellowship of the Ring, Frodo's desperate flight, the Nazgul's relentless hunt, the gathering storm across Middle-earth, was shaped by this unseen shadow war, fought in forests, dungeons, and dark places far from the Shire. What makes the hunt for Gollum so compelling is how unseen it is. Aragorn's greatest service to the Fellowship may have occurred before he ever met Frodo. Gandalf's obsession with the ring's identity nearly cost him everything, but it was right. And the entire war might have turned out differently had they not found Gollum. It's the kind of spy story Tolkien rarely tells explicitly, but it's all there, in the margins and the appendices. Here's the exciting part. This long whispered chapter of Middle-earth is finally coming to the big screen, and the plot synopsis has been revealed. As of February 2026, a new film titled The Lord of the Rings: The Hunt for Gollum is officially in production. Directed by and starring Andy Serkis, the legendary performer who first brought Gollum to life. Joining him once again is Peter Jackson as producer, with Fran Walsh and Philippa Boyens returning as co-writers, the Academy Award-winning creative team behind the original trilogy. Elijah Wood is set to return as Frodo Baggins, and at 87, Sir Ian McKellen will once again take up the mantle of Gandalf. However, Viggo Mortensen has not been confirmed to reprise his role as Aragorn, and at this stage, his return appears unlikely. So far, here's what's been released of the plot. The story takes us back to Smeagol, a curious, restless outsider, long before the One Ring twisted him into the tormented being known as Gollum. When the ring is lost to Bilbo Baggins, Gollum is driven from his cave by a craving he cannot resist. The ring is gone, but its call still consumes him. Sensing the growing danger, Gandalf turns to a trusted ally, Aragorn, still known in the wild as Strider. He is charged with hunting down the elusive creature, whose knowledge of the ring's whereabouts could tip the balance towards the Dark Lord Sauron. Set in the shadowed years between Bilbo's mysterious disappearance and the forging of the Fellowship, this perilous pursuit leads deep into the darkest corners of Middle-earth. Along the way, long-buried truths surface, the endurance of a future king is tested, and the fractured soul of Gollum is explored in greater depth than ever before. Whether the film closely follows Aragorn's legendary 8-year hunt or expands the saga with new moments of tension and tragedy, it promises to illuminate one of Tolkien's most unexplored stories, bridging the beloved trilogy with a gripping, character-driven chapter that could reshape how we see the events leading to the Fellowship of the Ring. So much of Tolkien's genius lies in what he implies, not just what he shows. The hunt for Gollum isn't just about a creature, it's about time slipping away, and desperate men trying to preserve a fragile peace. It's about the shadows before the storm. It's about choices, regret, and the heavy cost of mercy. The mercy Bilbo showed Gollum, and the mercy Frodo would later echo. Thanks for watching You Shall Not Scroll. If this is your first time here, don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into Tolkien's world, from Forgotten Kings to Ring Bearers and everything in between. This video was created in February 2026, just ahead of the upcoming Hunt for Gollum movie release. So if you're watching this in the future, was it any good? Let us know in the comments what other moments from Tolkien's lore you think deserve their own adaptation. The Life of Feanor, The Fall of Gondolin, Tom Bombadil's musical madness. Thanks for watching, we'll see you again soon.